Good day. This is Anthony Adams, and I've been given the opportunity to kind of talk about a lot of different things, my campaign, who I am, what my history is, kind of what I've actually done in our community. And so I want to thank Wjzz Cool Tv for giving me this platform because oftentimes when we talk through the media, everything is filtered, it's cut. This is going to be Anthony Adams raw, as you never seen me before. When I started this campaign back in January 26th, when we made an actual formal announcement, what I talked about in that opening and what my wife talked about was the fact that the city needed someone who really understood what our city was about. That we needed to connect with a leader who understood the issues impacting our neighborhoods. That we needed a person who lived in the community, from the community, who understands what the community needs and has a passion for community service. And so after we announced our campaign, we got on the campaign trail and we've been to every nook and cranny in this city. There isn't one area of this city left that I haven't touched in one way, shape, form, or fashion. Whether it was by direct visit, whether it was by phone call or Zoom with the more than 300 probably organizations that I've had a conversation with, whether it is public forums, you name it. I've been to dog shows, every type of event imaginable in the city of Detroit, I have been out. In part because it was very important for people to understand my passion and who I am and why I'm running to become the mayor of the city of Detroit. And so what I'm going to do today is really walk you through my life, step by step, a historical examination of me, so that you understand my background, what really drives me, what really motivates me to do what I do. Then we're going to talk about my experience in government, my life experiences and things that I've been involved with. And so this is, again, Anthony Adams Raw. I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. I was born January 9th, 1956, so I'm 65 years old. I was born to the union of George Washington Adams Jr. and Juanita M. Adams. Now, the irony of my birth is that my father wanted to name me George Washington Adams Jr. My mother was having none of that, and she decided, I'm really happy that she didn't name me after George Washington Adams Jr., because I think having your own name as a child is so important. And so she named me Anthony Adams. And when I got older, I asked my mom, I said, Mama, why did you name me Anthony Adams? She says, you'll never be able to sit in the back of the classroom with the name AA. And so I grew up with a nickname. My friends called me A Square, or they called me Tony Cool. Because one time when I was in high school, I took an extra yearbook photo and put a fake name under the name. The name was Tony Cool, and got it into the yearbook. I thought they would have probably pulled the picture out, but they didn't. And so in one yearbook, you see two pictures of me. You'll see a picture of me under my real name, and you'll see a picture of me under my moniker of Tony Cool. And that nickname also stuck with me as well. I went to a school called Walnut Hills High School. It was a admission-only school, kind of similar to Cass Tech, but with one small distinction. It was, first of all, it was a junior high through high school, so it was a 7 through 12 school, and you were required to take 3 years of Latin in the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. If you wanted to take a fourth year, when you got to high school, if you wanted to just take one more year of Latin, then you could have totally avoided taking your foreign language requirement because you took 4 years of Latin. But most people were so happy to get out of Latin after that 9th grade year that they either took Spanish or French or German. I played on the junior high football team. Tried out for varsity, wasn't really that good. Played basketball. I played junior varsity as well as varsity basketball. Started quite a few games in my career. I really enjoyed basketball. As my high school career came to an end, I decided, and my mother decided, that I needed to go to college. that there was not going to be a young man in her house because I was raised by a single parent. My mother got divorced when I was very, very young. And so I was raised by my mother, who again was a true public servant. I enrolled in the University of Cincinnati because at that time the university was actually owned by the city of Cincinnati. And so if your parents worked for the city, then you got free tuition in order to attend college. And so obviously coming from a working class home, a working class mother, that free tuition rung really, really well in her ear. And I enrolled in the University of Cincinnati, majoring in urban management, urban planning. I was in the college known as the College of Community Services. It was a college composed of various interdisciplinary programs designed in urban management, urban planning, understanding municipal budgeting, because I always had this desire that I wanted to be a professional city manager. That was a really popular career occupation when I was growing up. And so I took the classes and also took an extensive number of graduate courses in urban management, urban planning, because they had a graduate school of urban management and planning, and they also had an undergraduate school in urban management, urban planning. And also in college, I, like most students, was very active at that time in Black Student Union, Black Student Government. I led a number of protests against the administration trying to change the condition of black students at the University of Cincinnati. We even demanded a meeting with the university professor to present our demands. A good friend of mine, Professor Kenneth Burnley, he was undergraduate with me, and we worked on these issues because it was always important to me that you need to be involved in education. You need to be involved in promoting black excellence in education and also being involved. Again, my mother taught me so very well that you have to continue to have community service in whatever you engage in. After college, I then enrolled in Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C. I wanted to pursue my degree. There are a couple of summers I'd actually gone and interned in D.C., worked in D.C. city government, worked for a number of federal agencies, and I thought that the best opportunity for me to really understand government was to be in the nation's capital. And it was a very exciting time. I could go down to the Supreme Court to see cases being argued. I could walk over to the Congress because the law school is actually located about 2 blocks within walking distance of the Capitol, U.S. Capitol. And so I would get off my train, we call it the subway, the Red Line from Silver Spring, Maryland. First I lived in Tacoma Park, and then we later moved to Silver Spring, Maryland. And it was a fun and exciting time. I could get off the Red Line, either go to class or go up to the Capitol. I also could go to watch trials in the U.S. District Court in the District of Columbia. Because the irony of the district is that even though it's I guess it's a territory, it's federal property in essence, they still have local government. And their federal prosecutor actually tried local trials in their district court system. So I had a chance to see just a lot of different trials. They had phenomenal black lawyers in the district who tried a lot of cases and got a chance to see a lot of trials. In fact, I actually saw the trial of Congressman Charles Diggs. Congressman Charles Diggs was on trial for, I think, padding his payroll with ghost employees. And I had a chance to sit in on his trial. And that becomes an important little factoid when you see what happened at the end of my law career. So while I was in Washington, D.C., I also worked in a lot of different federal agencies. I worked in the Department of Justice Tax Division. I worked in the Securities Exchange Commission. I worked for the Department of Health, at that time, Education and Welfare. It was all combined, and then they separated the Education Department out. I clerked at 2 very prestigious law firms and did some real groundbreaking work in prisoner rights habeas corpus petitions. These were petitions that were being filed by people who have been wrongfully imprisoned and working to really get them free. Because I didn't necessarily have a chosen career path, I thought I wanted to be a securities lawyer, but also like litigation. I did a lot of moot court competitions. Moot court competitions are sort of trials that you have, and you argue your cases before judges, and you go and you travel across the country, and I really enjoyed a moot court because I like to talk. And so if you like to talk, you like to argue points, moot court was the perfect place and situation for me to be in. After I graduated from law school, I then moved to Michigan. At the time, I was married to someone else, and I got a clerkship with the Honorable Anna Diggs Taylor, the ex-wife of Congressman Charles Diggs. I was the first black law clerk she actually had hired. Up until that point, it was an office full of women. I mean, from the clerk to the judge to the secretary, everybody was women in the office. But you know, growing up in a single-family household, you kind of know how to deal with women, and being the junior law clerk, you had a responsibility of always getting to the courtroom before the judge showed up for work. Now I had the pleasure because my judge was an early riser, and so there was not a time when she didn't get to the federal court building down on Lafayette by 7 o'clock in the morning. And so I remember always having to get up early to get to the federal building because Judge Taylor liked to have her coffee hot, and she would come in with her china dish and saucer and pour her coffee because that was a junior clerk's responsibility. All these things might sound minor, but you know you get into a repetition of about doing things, of having structure, of having form in your life. And we had some really phenomenal cases. When you work as a junior law clerk, you kind of get to handle all the little stuff, but in your second year, then you get to handle the big stuff, and that was really fun because then you got to sit in on trials, you got to sit in on preliminary injunction hearings. I remember a very famous case. It was Martin Marietta versus Bendex, which was a really famous case back then. It was a guy named Bill Agee. I think he was executive of Bendex, and somehow or another he got caught up in a relationship with one of his employees, and it was a big issue, and there was a takeover battle between two companies that were equal sides that wanted to take each other over. The one thing that was so interesting about that case was that the one firm was represented by this lawyer who was very disrespectful to my judge. And I remember him kept saying, I don't understand why she won't sign the damn order. Sign the order giving them the right to do what they wanted to do. And I heard what this guy said in the chambers, and I looked at my judge, and she didn't break a smile. She didn't do anything. And after they left the office, she said, I don't care what the law is. I don't care what the law says. You need to rule against these people because how he treated me with disrespect, I can't be treated with disrespect like that. And so I had to spend all night trying to craft a written opinion for her to read from the bench the next day to deny this injunction for this other company. It taught me a very important lesson that you don't always need to respond at that point in time, but you need to respond when it's appropriate and necessary. When I left my clerkship after 2 years, I then went and worked for a firm that became the predecessor of the Clark. It was the Clark Hill firm. It's Clark Hill now, but the firm I went with was the Hill, Lewis, Adams, Goodrich, and Tate. They ultimately merged with the Clark Hill firm. I became a litigation associate and really enjoyed litigation. And because I was a law clerk in the federal building, I had a lot of experience in handling trials, handling briefs, handling pleas, the things that lawyers have to do in order to be a litigation attorney. The one famous case we had was the Detroit Lions and Billy Sims versus the Houston Argonauts. This was the case, if you recall, where the USFL was starting their football league, and they were raiding players from the NFL. And Jerry Argovitz, who was Billy Sims' agent, became an owner of a team. And he entered into a contract with Billy Sims, a contract for $1 million a year, which at that time, 1985-86, was a phenomenal sum of money for a person playing football. And so Billy finds out that Jerry had offered another player, Jim Kelly, who ultimately ended up playing for the Buffalo Bills, a contract which had an escalator provision in it, meaning that regardless of what Jim Kelly's contract said, that he would always be paid in the top 3 of all quarterbacks in the USFL. He did not extend that same privilege to Billy Sims, and so Billy got pissed, came back to the Lions, and wanted to void his contract with the Houston Gamblers. And through a long case in front of federal judge Damasio, ruled that it was a conflict for an agent to enter into a contract with one of his players, and that the contract's terms could be voided because of the conflict of interest. Around 1985, I started hearing this rumor that Mayor Coleman Young actually was looking to hire a young lawyer type person to join his staff. Now, in those days in politics, you really had to be connected to somebody. And so if you were connected with the UAW, or you were connected with somebody who grew up with Coleman, or you were connected with somebody involved in politics like a political family, then you had almost an open path to getting this type of position and appointment with Mayor Young, because this was a mayoral appointment. So I go in, I call and I send my information in, never expecting to hear anything because I wasn't really connected with politics like that. Lo and behold, about 2 months later, I get a phone call. They tell me that the mayor wants to meet with me. I said, Mayor Young? They said, yes. So they set up an appointment. I go over to the municipal center at that time, 11th floor. I go up to the office. I sit there. I'm nervous I'm a nervous Nelly because I'm getting ready to talk to one of the greatest mayors in the history of America, Coleman Young. And so I go into his office, and he's sitting there, as he always did. He kind of always sat back and kind of just looked at you. How you just kind of scraggly. He had like a scraggly voice because I guess he had been a heavy smoker at one time. And we talked, for about a half hour, and I was just really excited, but I didn't think I made a good impression on the guy. I thought it was just a great half-hour interview, and I would go back to practicing law. I think maybe about a month later, I got a phone call. They said they'd offer me the position, and I was like, wow, this is fun. So I told the people at the firm that I was going to work for Coleman Young, and they were sorry to see me leave, but I changed my life. I went to work for Mayor Young. I was a young executive assistant to the mayor. And the interesting thing about me going to work with Mayor Young in 1985 was that there actually was another young man who came to work for Mayor Young, a young lawyer type. His name was Conrad Mallett Jr. And so our histories are kind of intertwined. We both worked for Coleman, although Conrad's family was connected. His father had worked for Mayor Young. There was a big connection, whereas I really had no connection. Because I love economic development, I really began to immerse myself in a lot of economic development projects that were existing at that time. And so at that time, there was the initial Cobo Hall expansion. One of the greatest political feats ever known to man, because you had Coleman Young and his ability to impose a hotel-motel region-wide liquor tax, hotel-motel liquor tax on all the hotels in the southeast Michigan region. Now, that's great political gamesmanship, because in those days we didn't have term limits, and so even though the mayor hadn't served in the state legislature for years, he still had a lot of relationships with legislatures that existed. And when you don't have term limits, which is one argument against why we should have term limits, people actually get a chance to develop relationships and understand how people operate, how people function. And even though you had some hostility towards the city of Detroit, the fact of the matter that Coleman was able to negotiate this deal, which imposed a liquor tax, motel tax, on the region to this day continues, which has led to additional expansions of Cobo Hall. I also worked on the Chrysler Jefferson initial plan expansion. I worked on the bringing commercial airline service to Detroit City Airport. I served on the Detroit Building Authority, which probably during that time period built damn near every new police precinct known to man. Worked on a lot of different issues, and then just did a lot of community work. The great thing about Mayor Young was that you couldn't be in his office and not get out into the community. And so every day, literally every weekend, there was something that if you were on staff, you had to attend. And so if it was the barbecue on the east side, deep on the east side in Detroit, if it was a house party somewhere, if it was a big event, the young people on the staff, really everybody on staff, had to take a letter from Coleman Young. That was a prized possession. People to this day still have letters where Coleman Young signed the letter for them, and you would present those letters. I count by all occasions, I probably had maybe 500, 600 chicken dinners over the course of working with Mayor Young, because you always had to get out and do things and just be involved in the community. And so after 6 years with Coleman Young, I then decided to go back into private practice, and I went to work for, ironically, the firm Dyker McGossett. the very firm now that is the registered agent for the political PACs and dark money PACs, they're actually attacking me. So there's a lot of irony in a lot of these relationships. I go work at Dyke Magassa. I'm working in affordable housing. I also work with a lot of nonprofits. I did the siting of most Home Depots in this entire region because they were just making their way into the region, and there were zoning issues and things that had to be done. So my practice extended outside the city of Detroit, but also did a lot of legwork in the city of Detroit. Worked for Church of Messiah as an example. Did a lot of affordable housing in that space right there. Because I really didn't like that big firm life, I struck out on my own with 3 other attorneys, Darwin Fair, Taylor Seague, and Harold Pope, and we formed a firm called Seague, Fair, Adams, and Pope. Well, we were able to really grow a successful firm of 14 lawyers and 17 support staff. Had an office in the First National Building. Was doing a lot of great things in the community, still working in spaces that I like to work in. Also serving on the board of the Wayne County Neighborhood Legal Services. Always being involved in a lot of different things that were kind of happening in the city. National Conference of Black Lawyers. The more progressive of the 2 lawyer groups. You have the Wolverine Bar Association. You got the National Conference of Black Lawyers. And as an aside, when I worked for the National Conference of Black Lawyers, they actually had a very interesting case. A lawyer by the name of Chokwe Lumumba, a very prominent Detroit lawyer who ultimately became the mayor of the city of Jackson, Mississippi. He had represented, I think, Assata Shakur, Tupac Shakur's mother, in the Brinks armed robbery trial. And he and the judge did not get along. Because if you know Chokwe did not back down from anything. And as a consequence of their back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, I think Chokwe's client got off. The day that the verdict came in, the judge cited Chokwe for criminal contempt of court summarily. There was no trial, there was nothing. He found him in contempt of court, issued a warrant for his arrest from the bench, and we worked out in the Southern District of New York. The U.S. attorney was a gentleman by the name of Rudy Giuliani. We go in, because I had just worked in the federal building, kind of knew the procedure and the processes. They asked me to come in to help represent Mr. Lumumba. And so they took the case up on appeal to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. I was the lead attorney, appellate attorney for Mr. Lumumba, and we were able to successfully reverse his conviction. I think it's the only criminal trial I actually ever had in my life. We were able to reverse his conviction and get it brought back to the district court, where at that time the judge simply dismissed the citation, and Mr. Lumumba was able to go on his merry way. After that, our firm dissolved. I decided I wanted to be a kind of a public housing consultant. And so I traveled around the country working with different public housing agencies, structuring affordable housing deals. You know, that was one thing I really enjoyed. Hope 6 projects, doing things of that nature. Actually, it was one of the lead parties in the redevelopment of the Parkside homes, the Jeffries projects, where we created Woodbridge Estates. One of the more creative projects, because it's the only public housing site in America where you actually have single-family housing that exists on that particular site. A really groundbreaking project that I worked on. After I did that, I got a call from an attorney who said that the school district needed a lawyer who was connected, who knew how things operated, and he thought I would be a perfect person for the position. So I went and interviewed, and at that time, the school district was under the control of a gentleman by the name of Dr. Kenneth Burnley. Dr. Kenneth Burnley was a real interesting guy. He had grew up in Mumford. He grew up and went to Mumford High School in the 50s. I think when he was there were very few black students in Mumford, because everybody knows that area was predominantly Jewish, and there were obviously some black families that moved in the area. Burnley went on, got his PhD, and become a superintendent in a school in Anchorage, Alaska. And he was selected at that time by the governor to come. I think it was Governor Engler, I believe, was selected to come and serve when they took over the school district the first time, to serve as the superintendent of the schools. I was selected as his general counsel. And I had oversight responsibility over the capital improvement project, which is a $1.5 billion project that the voters had voted to build schools and also was responsible for managing the district's Title I money. This was the time when the district had 25,000 employees, 250,000 students, 220 buildings. It was a huge municipal organization. And I managed my job well, was very progressive in my hires, hired a lot of women to work on my staff. I've always had a good working relationship with women under my employment, and so it was a great time. We did some really creative things, reduced the district's exposure, did some really wonderful things. About the summer of 2004, I started getting phone calls from a guy named Kwame Malik Kilpatrick. Kwame Malik Kilpatrick. I didn't really know Kwame Kilpatrick, but he had been calling me because he said he wanted to talk with me, and I couldn't figure out why in the hell he wanted to talk to me. So I avoided him. I never returned his call. For about 2 months, he continued to call me. I never called him back. Ultimately, I get a call from Don Barton and Bella Marshall Barton. Really dynamic couple in the city of Detroit. Power brokers. Don, obviously, major player, casino magnate, doing a lot of real estate development. Bella, in her own right, brilliant attorney, involved in public finance, and they worked together and did a lot of real estate deals. We actually did one of the major real estate deals we did was Woodbridge Estates. It was a single-family housing subdivision that was built with private money, the first totally privately financed subdivision in the city of Detroit. Some work I did back in the day with Coleman Young actually was Victoria Park. Victoria Park subdivision was a partnership between the city of Detroit and the Builders Association of Southeastern Michigan. At that time, it was Standard Federal Bank. They ultimately became Bank of America. And we put together one of the most successful single-family housing subdivisions ever built in the state of Michigan. Had my handiwork, had my footprints on in terms of creating a suburban-style community in an urban environment. So after I talked to Bella and Don and Bill Brooks and some other black business people, I said, well, you know, if the young man needs help, and if the city needs help, I will volunteer for service. And boy, did I not know what I was getting ready to get my butt in. So around December of 2004, I remember going down and walking through Cobo Hall with Kwame Kilpatrick, and this was my first introduction into life in the Kilpatrick administration. So I started working as deputy mayor, and this was after all the stuff with the firing of Gary Brown and the stripper allegations and all this, the crazy stuff that had happened in the first term. I came in the second term. And that's important for people to understand. I wasn't there in the beginning, but I was there in the end. So I'm given the responsibility of being deputy mayor, and at that time they put me over the public safety portfolio, which consisted of the Detroit Police Department, Detroit Fire Department, Homeland Security, a lot of internal operations that relate to the public infrastructure. Over time, I got full responsibility for managing the city's budget, understanding the complexity of the part, sitting through budget hearings, through every department in the city, talking with folk, getting out into the field, whether it was DPW, going to DDOT transportation yards, talking to the mechanics. There wasn't one aspect of city life that I wasn't involved in as deputy mayor. And this was also during the time when the city was facing extreme financial issues. There were newspaper articles that were talking about the city was going to go into bankruptcy, that we would not be able to sustain ourselves. And through some creative budgeting, we did a lot of things like selling a ton of real estate. In fact, I do remember a deal we had to sell the Broadhead Armory for $5 million back in 1980. Back in 2006. We had a deal on the table to sell the Broadhead Armory for $5 million back then, only to have this current guy sell the property for less than $300,000, $400,000. You can't buy a house on the river for that much, but he sold him a 5.5, 6 acre site on the Detroit River. Managing the budget, dealing with certain issues, and then around 2007, I think it was 2007, I'm at home one day. I'm sick with. I have a bad cold, and he calls me on my phone. Well, first he pages me because back in the days everybody had them old big old pages on their hip. I didn't answer the page because I wasn't doing good that day. He called me and says, "Dep, you got to get to the office." Now I'm like, man, look, I'm sitting at home. I'm under the weather. He like, you got to come down. Something getting ready to pop. So I'm like, damn, I'm trying to figure out what the hell was gonna pop. So he comes into my office and he says some shit getting ready to break on me and Christine. I'm saying shit like what? This was obviously after the Gary Brown trial, after the city. I'm sorry, it was before the Gary. Yeah, it was before after the Gary Brown trial. City's getting ready to get hit with this big judgment. He comes in and says, me and Christine were having an affair. And I'm like, why, why the hell? I told you before the trial, after I listened to Christine's testimony, I told him he would be a fool to get on the witness stand and testify at that trial. I told him that the case needed to be settled in midstream, that he did not need to take the stand, but he disregarded my advice. In fact, I remember telling him, the only thing between you and greatness is this Gary Brown trial. He chose not to listen to me. And so then it began to unravel because really after the settlement after the case settled for Gary Brown, because they took an appeal, he had already gotten the verdict. They took an appeal of that decision, the city did. The appeal was dropped. And I remember thinking it kind of odd that why would they drop an appeal like that if we thought, we had a good case. I didn't think we had a good case, but again, you take the steps to appeal the case, and next thing you know, the case is settled. So what was interesting was that because I was the FOIA person, so when the Freedom of Information Act request came in to the city, I also reviewed all of those FOIA requests. And so I remember after the thing settled, getting a FOIA request from, I believe, a guy by the name of M.L. Elric. M.L. Elric, who was a reporter for the Detroit Free Press at that time. Excuse me. Sending a FOIA request requesting information on what he called was a secret agreement. Now, as soon as I see the word secret and anything about Brown and Gunn, I'm like, what the hell is going on? So I immediately call up the general counsel and say, what the hell is he talking about? And everybody played dumb. The mayor played dumb. General counsel played dumb. Nobody wanted to give up the goods on exactly what happened. And obviously all hell breaks loose because the Free Press runs an exclusive article where they disclose the text messages and the lies and deceit. And I felt really let down by all of that because it was something that I knew that could have been avoided had you first settled the lawsuit at the end of the 2005 election, when you came back and beat Freeman Hendricks, the most well-financed opposition to any mayor ever. I think Freeman raised something like $6 or $7 million to defeat Kwame Kilpatrick. Actually won the primary, and Kwame won in the general election. And I told him at that time in 2005 he needed to settle that lawsuit. But of course, being who he was, he chose not to settle it in 2005. We could have resolved that lawsuit for $1 million. $1 million. Which meant there would have been no text messages disclosed from SkyTel. When Gary Brown's lawyer served the subpoena, there would have been no trial. There would have been nothing, which really would have changed the political dynamic of the city, because everything that led to his dismissal was the perjury on the stand and lying at trial. Straight up lie. When all you had to do was tell the truth. So he goes up in a blaze of glory. He burns out. He steps down. He resigns. At that time, I had been actually shifted over to the water department. I was the interim director of Detroit Water and Sewer, managing their relationships, beating back suburban control of our district when they really wanted to take control of our city and how we managed our water system. We rebuffed that. And the interesting thing about that, because there's so many overlapping relationships, was there was a guy named Tom Lewan who actually represented Macomb County in water issues. But he also served as the, quote, special master with the federal judge, which I thought was a conflict. Because how could I be in relationship with the federal judge that's actually overseeing the trial and representing a party who was in the trial? But, you know, white folks get away with stuff that black folks can't get away with. Fought that back. They never ever able to get control of the system while I was the interim director of that system, in spite of Kwame Kilpatrick and all his issues. And to be honest with you, I felt really let down by Kwame Kilpatrick. I felt let down because all he had to do was be straight up and honest with me. We would have advised him, you always do the right thing. You always make sure that you do the things that are right to protect the people, because what happened was it set aside a cascading effect. You had your mayor forced out of office as a result of perjury. You had an accidental mayor who assumed control. Then you had a candidate of the corporate community, Dave Bing, who came in to manage, you know, the city, to run politically, was backed by the Chamber of Commerce, backed by all the money interests to become the mayor, to defeat Cockrell as mayor. And then obviously they pulled the rug out from up under Dave, you know, fed him a bill of goods. Snyder, in concert with Duggan, in concert or with Kevin Orr, you know, constructed a takeover of the city of Detroit politically. But by then, the constant drumbeat of blacks not being able to represent themselves, blacks being guilty of corruption, blacks being tarred with the mismanagement thing. And so the major issue that I've had to deal with a lot on this fucking campaign is people wanting to link me to Kwame Kilpatrick. And I say, damn, I didn't get the invitation to the wedding. If I was that tight with the guy, you would have thought I would have got a damn invitation to the wedding. I didn't even get that. And I see my opponent sitting in the front row with his fiance, a woman who he claimed he didn't know. And lo and behold, next thing we know, he claimed he don't know her, but then 6 months later, damn near, they done got married. But people want to continuously blame me for Kilpatrick. I'm saying, how you going to blame me for a grown man and what he does? Who not my son? That'd be one thing if he was my son. He wasn't even, he was my employer. He was a person who I worked with. He was a person who concealed information from me. And so I get damn sick and tired, I do, of people want to constantly link me to Kwame Kilpatrick. And I'm saying I wasn't in Kwame shit, okay? Because if I had been, I'd have been indicted. All the Negroes that got indicted, I was nowhere to never to be found. My name never surfaced on anything. My name never came up on anything. I never testified at a fucking trial for Kwame Kilpatrick. But Negroes want to constantly, because it fits their narrative of who they want to define who I am as a person, and that's not who I am. See, I existed before Kwame Kilpatrick and certainly exist after Kwame Kilpatrick. And don't get me wrong, I have no ill will towards Kwame Kilpatrick. I'm happy that he's found the Lord. I just always said I wish he had found the Lord, 12 years earlier, because it would have spared everybody a lot of grief and would have changed the dynamic of our city, because instead of people blaming black folks for not managing the city properly, it would have put it in different context. And I think that is a little overblown, because if you understand what the city lost over time, from the time that I worked for Coleman Young to the time that I worked for Kwame Kilpatrick, the city had lost almost 1 million friggin' people. You can't lose 1 million people. You can't lose 80, 90,000 manufacturing jobs. You can't have your tax base eroded and continue to manage. And then you, on top of that, you have the state actually taking action to reduce revenue from the city to make it much more difficult to manage what we had. And so when you start to get a couple, the loss of population, the loss of manufacturing, the loss of housing stock, all these factors play a critical role in diminishing the value of what the city had to operate for. And then when you end up with the fact that you got more people who are retired versus active workers in the city, in the old days it was the reverse. You had more people working than you had retired. And the irony of bankruptcy is that the people who got hurt the most were the damn employees who Coleman Young hired in the 70s and 80s. They were the ones who got the clawbacks on the pension, who got screwed, and there's been no effort to help our retirees The people who rendered valuable service to this city to help them get shit. And that was a part of the plan. Again, taking people that have worked hard all their lives for the city of Detroit, and last thing they know, they're getting money clawed back from them when they should have put the bankruptcy on the back of the corporations and the financing companies that finance the city's debt. That's where the problem should have been. But then you have, because everybody was in bed, because Duggan was in bed with Kevin Orr, and he was in bed with Snyder, because people be forgetting shit about Duggan. They forget the fact that this is the man who was the MC for Governor Snyder's inaugural ball after it was clear that Snyder had poisoned the city of Flint. And so it's always convenient to rewrite shit when you want to, because that's the narrative they want you to understand. But we're saying you need to understand what the facts are. And everywhere that he's been, catastrophe has followed. Wayne County ended up on the financial cliff. Prosecutor's office did some shady stuff there with respect to the Malice Green, talking about Black Lives Matter. This was the prosecutor who tried to force the medical examiner to say that Malice Green died as a result of cocaine overdose. DMC. So he pockets millions, and now what's the condition of DMC? And now City of Detroit, the prize gem, the prize jewel of what's going on. So we can't allow people to rewrite their history. We gotta understand what the history is in the City of Detroit. And by the way, during that time period, I got appointed to the Detroit Board of Education, initially appointed, then elected, and on write-in campaign, and became the board president and led the fight against Robert Bobb in emergency management. Ultimately settling back in private practice with my wife, Lynn Marie Adams, a very prominent, outstanding, beautiful, vivacious, and we're actually getting ready to celebrate our 10-year wedding anniversary. Seems like only yesterday we got married. So let's talk about, this is a history that I'm giving you so that you understand my passion and what drives me. So when I talk about how we help this city, I'm talking about how we move ourselves forward with a progressive platform. And so I've been talking about the need to stabilize our neighborhoods and our community. We have not provided the resources necessary to support people living in their homes, which is why we've had more than 70,000 people leave the city of Detroit over the last 8 years. And it's obvious why they left. A large portion of those people were overtaxed and taxed out of their own homes. A large portion of those people were not able to maintain and pay the water bills. A large portion of those people were paying taxes that they really did not have to pay because they qualified for different programs, but no one talked to the people about what these programs were to help them keep their homes. And now we're at risk of having 40,000 new people lose their homes as a result of tax foreclosures. We go from a city that was a predominantly home ownership city to a now predominantly renter class in our own community. I've seen some studies that say home ownership is as low as 35% in a community. That's an abomination. We can no longer have that situation. And we've got to force and change our directive of policy on how we move housing forward, which is why I'm saying the best blight removal strategy is to keep people in their homes, to provide them with the resources necessary. They come out with this $30 million senior housing program, but hell, you got 20,000 people on the current list for senior housing that ain't got shit. And so when you tell me you're doing something, I'm saying understand what the facts are. A $30 million commitment to put roofs on it. What if I don't need a roof? What if I don't need a roof? What if I need windows? What if I need concrete work done in my house? What if I need siding? No, God decrees that you have to get a roof. And a lot of people don't need a roof. They need something else. And when you're talking about $15,000 for people, most of these people's houses require much more than that. But we're losing people because we're not keeping them stabilized in their homes. So I'm saying we're going to reshift that paradigm. We're going to change the focus of how we deal with affordable housing and keep people in their home. Because we got the people who are working class, poor people in the city that don't qualify for one damn program. And when you're telling me you're trying to keep people in their homes, I'm saying this is what we need to do if we're going to change the direction of the city and provide people what they want. When I also talk about overtaxation and overassessment, I continue to drum this beat. Because what we're looking at again is 40,000 people that are actually getting ready to lose their homes. I put in a FOIA request to the Wayne County Treasurer to actually get this list of houses. And they sent me back a note telling me I need to pay $250 for the list. So that money's going to go out tomorrow, and they're going to get that. And I'm going to send it to them because I want this list to be posted on my website so you can take the opportunity to look at that list, to see if your mama's house on that list, to see if your auntie's house on that list, to see if your house is on that list, and to figure out what we need to do to help you pay your taxes. I've been talking about water infrastructure, conservation. Now, we have serious flooding issues taking place in our city because they failed to maintain the system. Let's be clear. They want to talk about once-in-a-lifetime weather events and all that, and then we find out that that was a damn lie. But when you uncheck, see, the problem here is that we have unchecked power in our community and that our leaders refuse to stand up, which is why I got a guy who can accuse me of hate speech, and not one preacher, not one person would stand up and say, that's bullshit. Where is the hate? It was no hate. It was the truth. The truth is painful. And yet, when you're able to set the narrative and have mainstream media try to control the messaging, people are scared. And I'm saying, people, stop being scared. What are you scared of? What are you afraid of? Why are you afraid? We're talking about how we protect your mother's home from tax foreclosure. We're talking about how you keep your family together and keep the water on, because when the water get cut off, DSS show up and the children get placed in foster homes. We're talking about transforming how we police ourselves with community intervention specialists, gang intervention specialists, social workers, psychologists, employment specialists. How we provide you with a package on my program called Get Your Shit Together Day. A day of general amnesty in the city of Detroit. Short of rape, robbery, and murder, you come in, man, we'll have it in Northwest Activity Center. And we'll say, look, what is it going to take to get you together? You don't have education. How do we help you get educational skills and training? How do we provide you with a training program? How do we provide you with a stipend? Because I can't get you off the street if you ain't making no money, because you got your hustle on and you holding on to the bag. And so I'm saying, let's take the bag out your hands that way. Let's put a good bag in your hand. Let's put a bag with training, with employment, with education, with mentoring, all the things necessary to help you get your shit together, because we need people with their shit together in this city. It is ironic that jobs are being, quote, brought into the city, but the skill deficit that exists between the people who live here and the people who are being brought here and the jobs that are being brought here, there's a wide delta between the two. And how are we improving our city if we don't move forward to help people improve the qualities of their lives? A major component part of that obviously deals with education. We cannot have a world-class city if we don't have a world-class education system. In the old days, it was a little easier because you had 95% of the kids that actually went to DPS system. But now with this fractured delivery of education, with charter schools on the one side, DPS schools on one side, and you still have a couple of Catholic schools, well, one Catholic school left in the city of Detroit. How do we make sure that the excellence of people being brought together is what it needs? And so to that end, I've called for the creation of a chief education officer, someone who would have the responsibility for advocating for educational excellence in our community. We have a strain of anti-intellectualism in our community that we don't necessarily value people who are smart. And I'm saying that's crazy, because if people have skills, people have talent, they have to bring to the table. We need to be embracing intellectualism in our community and reducing the level of emotionalism, and we have. I think we can get a much better result. So the chief education officer is responsible for that, making sure that our schools do what they're supposed to do, making sure that our charter schools are not suspending and expelling students from the school district under the guise of some behavioral issues. How do we provide the necessary wraparound services and supports? Because you understand that if I'm working a shift at a factory, my hours are crazy. And so how do I know that my kids are getting the proper nutrition, the proper learning environments, especially if we have libraries closed? Because when I was growing up in the old day, when you left school, you went to the library to do your homework before your mother got home, because that was a safe place for you to be. And our libraries are not open because they're stripping money away from our libraries to tax captures, which are reducing the ability of people to even have access to the internet and computers. Because if you know Detroit, you know that a lot of people come to the library for their internet access. And we also got to deal with and address the digital gap. So that chief educational officer is going to be responsible for that, pulling together the program and making sure that the right wraparound services are available. Because when we talk about parents not working in the city of Detroit, what we end up with are parents who have issues. They have transportation issues. If I got to ride the bus, D-Dot bus to work, I got an issue because, hell, the bus service is being cut. And the drivers, we have to give them a shout out to the D-Dot bus drivers, to the D-Dot mechanics, to the D-Dot security people who work every fucking day during the pandemic. Every fucking day. And for them not to get the level of hazard duty pay for maintaining that system during the worst pandemic in 100 fucking years? Are you kidding me? Do we so value human life and the commitment of people to our city that we just simply leave them hanging out there? And you see it in all different departments, because I've talked to a ton of different people working for the city of Detroit. They feel devalued in their service to the city. And we got to begin to change that and restore a level of confidence in our community. At the end of the day, what's driving our situation is we got to spiritually heal ourselves in our community. We have fractured relationships. We have divisions built on jealousy, animosity, the crab in the barrel mentality that we got to begin to stop. If we're going to move our city forward, we have to move our city from a spiritual perspective. We've got to get people healed in our community. The level of gun violence in our community is endemic of a psychosis that we have to address and address 911. We're not going to have a healthy city if we don't have people that are employed, we don't have people who have hope, and we don't have people who have an aspiration about how they can actually change their lives. And so I just laid out some things about me, my history, so that you'll get a better sense of who I am. You know, it's difficult, again, to talk through Zoom or not to have mainstream media kind of try to shape who you are as an individual. But you've heard it from me. You've heard it from the horse's mouth. A person who is committed to the city of Detroit, who wants to ensure that your children have just as right to a good education as my children had, who believes that people need to have safe housing in their community, that the police need to be respectful, and that city services need to be at a level of par excellence. And so if you need to go to my website, it's anthonyadamsformayor.com. I have my office is located at 19512 Livernois. I've got an AA313. I think that's my Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff you got. I even got a TikTok now. Please take a look at my material. Please stop by the office and have a conversation with me. I need your support. I need your vote. Please vote early. I'm not going to say vote often. Early voting has already started, and you can vote up through November the 2nd, the day of the final election. So this is Anthony Adams, and I need your support. Thank you.